Good morning and welcome back to our fourth and final series of our Certified Personnel Evaluation help for your 50/50 committees. My name is Amanda Ellis, Associate Commissioner over the Office of Teaching and Learning, and we're happy to house this information and happy to bring additional information to you as you work with your 50/50 committees to adjust and refine your certified evaluation plan according to the new law and the changes that have taken place. Before I get started though, I just want to remind you that if you look at the bottom of your screen, there'll be the gosoapbox.com web address, and of course the password is OTL. I have my computer sitting right with me, so if you have any questions during that time or something that may not be very clear, I'll do my best to answer those questions for you. But otherwise, please take a minute to log in so you can have access to us, and we'll get started. So in the past few weeks, we have offered this is our fourth series of things to be thinking about when you're working with your certified evaluation plan. And so today our objectives are pretty simple. They sound simple, but they're big decisions for you to make. We're going to just briefly review the components of personnel evaluation system, what we talked about already, and some decision-making points that you and your 50/50 committee will have to make to take before your local board, as well as just begin thinking about how you will determine performance ratings. And this can be very challenging depending on how you approach this part of the work for your personnel evaluation system. So if you look on your screen, you're going to notice the graphic that we used from the very first webinar. It's a very skinny view of compared to what it looked like when we used to have a statewide system. But if you look on your screen, on the left, we had talked about the criteria, which are the performance criteria that teachers, other professionals, and at the bottom, of course, principal and assistant principal standards is where they have the descriptors, and the domains and the standards are all located that will help guide you or your supervisors into what to look for. And that is really your basis on what you're evaluating, what you are trying to grow, where you're trying to reach, because the beauty of those frameworks is it really outlines the complexity of the jobs in education that are being evaluated, any of those jobs under the role of superintendent. The next step you would see on over, it says evidences, and again it says district determined. This is what it used to be, the state evidences. Now that's up to the district. And what we have talked about many times is that we have talked about the importance of this slide right here, is that under those criteria performance measures, you have 4 that you're looking for: planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. And we talked at great length about the evidences that would provide you enough information to make a rating for each of those measures. So if you look at this screen, the Kentucky Framework for Teaching has under planning, it would be Domain 1, planning and preparation. Under other professionals, again, Domain 1, planning and preparation. And for principal performance standards, it would be human resource management and organizational management. And it all fits under that measure of planning. And the thing we really push you to think about is what type of evidence could you collect or could you observe to use to make a sound, defensible rating that is evidence-based. And that goes all the way through environment, instruction, and professionalism. And you can see what goes under each one. And the one thing we want to really emphasize that we haven't said before is we've given you the example of teachers, we've given you the example of principals, but we really encourage you to think about what are the appropriate evidences based on the role. So for example, under the framework for specialists, that would be your library and media specialist. Some instruct classes, others do not, and there are very specific standards and very specific criteria under other professional. The same goes for your counselors. Their criteria is going to look different under the specialist framework than teaching. So don't always assume that the evidence you select is a one-size-fits-all. Just very much like we have evidences that we use to determine student growth and the different ways that we measure that should be considered as well for your professionals. What works for teachers and makes sense and would provide strong evidence may not be applicable to the criteria and the domains of the other professionals. Same goes for principal and assistant principal. Clearly, their roles are very different, and the way in which you would want to grow them and what they're focused on is very unique to teaching and for the specialist framework. So we just really want to encourage you to think about that. The other thing we talked about in great length, which seems very small but matters, is time and frequency. One of the things that the new Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 1 from 2017 really emphasizes, which it was emphasized before, is the importance of being aware of time, the amount of time the evidence take to collect and the process itself. So we encourage you to think through what evidences would you do, how often would you do those. Clearly, for environment and instruction, those two measures have to be observable. They just do. So in your observations, how often are you observing? Are you doing full observations? Are you doing short mini observations? What is it exactly that you're doing, and how much time? Are you being considerate of the time, and is it worthy? Is it worthy of the time to grow your people and provide appropriate ratings, and is it providing the evidence you need to rate each one of those measures? And so that's just kind of a reminder of that, but this really is going to play into our next conversation. So as you're thinking through the evidences, and as you're thinking through how that aligns to reflect the criteria that's outlined in each one of those measures, how will you rate that? And so those are the discussion pieces that we're going to talk about briefly today. This is not a long webcast, but it's the heaviest one, I would say, and has the most meaning, because what you want is a fair, equitable, and defensible evaluation system for your staff, for your certified staff. And so it's really imperative that your 50-50 committee have this conversation. Have we selected the correct evidence that's going to reflect the criteria in which we're trying to measure? Because when supervisors have this information, do they have the right evidence to make a professional judgment on the rating of environment, for example, or professionalism? Or are you just collecting things? So make sure that it's meaningful, that it's going to provide the right evidence, it's defensible, and it's a fair and equitable way to measure effectiveness of your staff. So I'm going to go back to the first graphic that we saw initially. And so as we talk through the criteria, and of course the 4 measures you can see in there: planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism, the evidences, you'll see that the arrows then take you down together to the middle. And in doing that, you're going to see this is district determined matrix or decision rules or formula. And so what we're really pushing on this is that once you have rated your 4 measures with the evidences, using professional judgment and the evidence base to determine the rating, using, of course, exemplary, I'm going to complete blank, accomplished, developing, or ineffective. Sorry about that. Once you have those 4 ratings for those measures, each of the 4 measures, planning, environment, instruction, professionalism, how will you use the ratings of those 4 measures to determine the overall summative rating for that certified staff? It's a very hard decision to make, and it's something that we can only provide talking points and things to think about, but really encourage you to walk through the process multiple times to ensure that it is something that you can support, that is defensible, fair, and equitable. Many people use a matrix. So for example, in our former system that we have been using, that you're probably using currently, we use decision rules. And so many of our topics that we've used as decision rules on formally as the professional practice. If you've kept that, what does that look like? What are the holes that are still there that maybe didn't make sense? We did the same thing with the decision-making rules for the overall summative. If you have an ineffective in one, you can't be higher than developing in something else. That is something that you would have to hash through with your 50-50 committee. Perhaps you want to have a formula that you weight measures. The thing that we want to really emphasize is that you are not weighting your evidences to determine the overall. The evidences play into how you rate the 4 measures, and then the overall summative should be based on the ratings of those 4 measures, not an individual observation, not how well somebody wrote a growth plan, but the overall view of that measure and what is it that's really being observed or evaluated through planning, environment, instruction, and professionalism. So those are some really big decisions that you need to think through. And so the two questions we're really going to push on today that seem very, very simple, but are not simple at all, there's something to think about, is how will the sources of evidence be used to determine ratings for each measure? We just discussed that. Do you have a couple of evidences? Do you have evidences that cover 2 of the 4 measures? Are you doing something outside of just an observation? Are you doing 2 observations and something else to play into that? Really dig into how are you measuring. And then the second question you'll have to determine after you figured out number 1 is what we've just discussed, is how will the ratings of each measure determine an overall summative rating? Now remember, not everybody gets a summative every year unless you deem that as necessary in your certified evaluation plan. But that would go back to, is that the best use of your time and is that what is needed? I will tell you that today we had intended to have a guest district share their plan on what they were going to do and what their 50-50 committee has suggested. So I'm just going to throw a couple of their ideas and hopefully we'll be able to feature them soon. But one 50-50 committee in the state is deciding how they're going to provide additional support to non-tenured teachers with additional observations and evidences to support their work and grow them in their early years. And those who are tenured really work on developing their leadership skills and to refine their practice. So their evidences may look different depending on whether they're tenured or not. And they're trying to make that very equitable and fair, but being personalized on the need and the level of experience and support that's offered to their teachers. Another are looking at specific evidences that really reflect the role of the other professionals. How do we do this? And they're also tying in how principals' goals are tied to the goals of the school. So there's a lot of decisions to be made, but it's something that takes a lot of thought. It's not quick and easy. There's not a cut and paste for this approach, but something you really need to think through as far as making your decisions for the ratings. I will tell you, when we were going through the state process and we had our teacher steering committee to decide for the state summative ratings, it was some of the most detailed, passionate discussions we've ever had, because this is about how we're rating the effectiveness of a teacher or a specialist or a principal and how we're going to help grow them. Because if you notice in the former slide, is that it doesn't end with the rating. The beauty of the system that we will always promote is continuous growth. And so if you notice, once the decision making is there, the arrow will point back to the left about a growth plan and the cycle. Whether you have a formalized growth plan or you have a system in which you are constantly trying to grow and help staff improve and refine their practice, you always want to do that. That's what you want for the best for your students. So really think through your intended outcomes. What do you want to do with those final summative ratings, and how do we move people forward to grow and continue to improve? So that is the single topic we have for today. But I do want to provide you with some district support that we're going to be offering. I'll send this today. Previously, we had the Working on the Work document, the WOW document, that walked you through what was state required and what was a decision rule for, or decisions for the district. We have revised that Working on the Work document, and we're going to send that. And basically what that has done is that document has narrowed down the topics that we have discussed in each one of these webinars. It does not capture the questions for the district per se, but it's just the sections of things to be cognizant of. You certainly still will need definitions and roles. You want to do that to ensure transparency and procedures, that you follow procedures. It's important to do that, and that is something that could easily be appealed. So you want a defensible system. There's also the procedures for appeals that are required. So it will lay out the things that are necessary, but we are not really outlining exactly how it's to be done. If there's something in the law specific that was written in statute or proposed regulation, we have noted that, but it really is just to help you as a district and a 50-50 committee decide on what needs to be placed in your certified evaluation plan. The other thing we want to remind you about is that we do have the archived webcast series of our Certified Evaluation Planning page. Those webcasts are available. If you don't want to look there, on our KDE OTL YouTube channel, they're all available as well. We have several webcasts on there. As you know, we're trying to really communicate through this medium, and it's working well, but that is a part of it. And then also coming up that we're really excited about are the regional work sessions. We will send you this PowerPoint today, and you will be able to click on that link. We're asking you to invite up to 4 members of your 50/50 committee and bring what's current or your draft certified evaluation plan. This is not going to be a sit and get. We walk you through it because the districts really have to own the decisions that they're making. This is no longer a statewide system. We are providing the parameters for you to help you build the system that works best for your district. And so we will be available to help you and have other 50/50 committees to collaborate with, share their plans. This is an opportunity for you to really enhance what you're offering to your staff and how to grow the professionalism and the expertise in your district. And of course, like I said, we will be there to support you. There are a few locations for you to come to, and we would be happy to assist in any way and hope that you'll take advantage of the opportunity to have some face-to-face time, some coaching, to offer suggestions or ideas that other districts may have. Other than that, that's really all we have for today. I think those are some pretty big questions to answer. It is certainly not an easy task, and I hope that you're already meeting with your 50/50 committee or have plans to do so soon. This committee has a huge role and probably one of the most active roles they've ever had in this process. So at this point, it doesn't look like we have any questions, but I do want to remind you, those who do watch our webcast, we have one more for this 2017 calendar year, and it will be next Tuesday, and we'll feature Robin McCoy and counselors. So at this time, I'm going to turn off, I guess, and let you move on with your day. If you have any questions, please know you can always reach out to us. I'm on the global as well as our entire team, as we have been a part of this web series. We hope that you have found this to be beneficial and are glad to help. We wish you a very warm and happy holidays and a great new year.